Good afternoon. I'm Senator Warren Daniel, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you are here. This is an opportunity for members of the public to offer comments on the redistricting process to members of the General Assembly, and this is an opportunity in a forum for us to hear from you. This is not a question and answer session, so do not ask your legislator a question here, although you can certainly follow up at any time with the legislator that represents you. But this is an opportunity for us to hear your comments about redistricting. We are grateful to have you here, and we look forward to hearing from you. A few ground rules before we get started. There have been prior meetings where applause was forbidden, but because it slows the process down and makes it difficult for the recording and transcription. And I've been in meetings also when applause was allowed. So what I'm going to do is ask you to use your judgment. If you feel that you must applaud, please do so quickly and quietly, and keep in mind that when you're applauding, the clock is running on the next person, and we don't want to shortchange anyone who wants to speak. Please do not boo. Everyone is here to give their opinion, so let's respect one another's opinions. Every speaker will have 2 minutes. We're going to call 2 names at a time, so the first person will be the speaker, and then the one will be in the on-deck circle. The other one will be on the on-deck circle, so to speak. Before the person who's on deck speaks, I will call the next name so that that person should be prepared to speak after the person in front of them speaks. This will allow us to proceed efficiently and give everyone a chance to speak. So before we get started, we want to introduce all the members and staff who are here for this meeting. I'm Senator Warren Daniel. I represent Senate District 46, which is Burke County, McDowell County, and a portion of Buncombe County. And I'm going to let each member represent themselves. And let's start at this end with Representative Adams.
Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Jay Adams, represent the 96th District, which is Hickory, Conover, and the upper part of Catawba County.
Good evening, and thank you for coming. I'm Representative Becky Carney from Charlotte. I represent House District 102, and that is the center part and northeast of the city.
Hello, I'm Ralph Heiss. I represent the 47th District. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Senate Elections and Redistricting Committee. My district includes Haywood, Madison, Yancey, Mitchell, Avery, Caldwell, Allegheny, Ashe, and Watauga counties. That's coming in, so that probably took all of somebody's 2 minutes. So,
And it's impressive that you can just rattle those off because they have changed over the years.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. My name is Julie Mayfield. I represent Senate District 49, which is, in contrast to Senator Heiss's district, Buncombe County. That's all I got. I also serve, I'm a member of the Redistricting Committee, and if I can, I just want to do a quick show of hands. How many folks are here from west of here? That's great. How many folks are here west of Buncombe County, from west of Buncombe County? Okay. My hope is next year or next time we do this, maybe we can have some hearings a little bit further west to get a few more folks here.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Jeff McNeely, District 84, 2/3 of the most beautiful part of Iredell County.
We also have sergeants at arms from the General Assembly that are here with us today. From the House, Sergeant at Arms, we have Todd Jordan and Stafford Young to my left. From the Senate, we have Dwight Green and Robert Cordell to my right. And we have 2 members of the General Assembly Police Department, Sergeant Bobby Barkefer and Adam Covell. So we thank all of the staff for being here. Also, we have 2 at the check-in desk, Jessica and Hillary, who you checked in with earlier. So many of you signed up online, and so I have that list. That's the list that I'm going to begin with. And you'll come to this podium, you'll step to the podium. The sergeants at arms will give you cues as to when your 2 minutes is up. And so we're just going to go in order as who signed up and then who actually came today. And so first on the list is Kathy Klein, and in the on-deck circle is Lynn Dorfman.
I'm Kathy Klein, first vice chair of the Buncombe County Democrats, and I'm directing my comments to the Republican committee members. The current Republican supermajority does not reflect the will of North Carolina's voters because it was created by one legislator who deceived the voters in Mecklenburg County. You have not earned this supermajority, but you are handling your advantage as if you were drunks on a binge. Directing almost $500 million to private schools, including religious schools, imposing legislative oversight on our court system, limiting our access to your public records, and turning our election system, our fully functioning election system, upside down and inside out without justification. You are the ones who complained without a shred of evidence about rigged elections, and now that's precisely what you're preparing to do. For years, Democrats have asked for an independent redistricting commission to determine fair districts, but you have refused. Instead, you will draw lines with the sole purpose of grabbing and holding on to your power. You will ultimately lose because North Carolinians are tired of legislators who care more about staying in office than they care about the people they serve. I urge you to reconsider the path that you're on and to arrange for a truly neutral and independent commission to draw these districts. Thank you.
Next, we have Lynn Dorfman, and then in the on-deck circle will be Priya Palmer.
I'm Lynn Dorfman. I'm here to advocate for a transparent, thorough, and fair redistricting process. I live in Congressional District 10, State Senate District 45, and House District 96. In the 10 years I've lived in Hickory, I've been in District 10, then 5, and back in 10. I was in State Senate District 42, now 45. I've been in State House 96 a whole decade. In 10 years, I've come to realize our polarized politics make the Old North State a place where it's vital that everyone pay attention, since so much of what happens, what matters to all citizens is decided quickly, often in the shadows or late at night. In 2021, there were 14 public hearings, a portal for public comments, and hearings before and after maps were released. This year's process makes me think Tar Heel State means people in power working behind closed doors to keep ordinary citizens like me stuck in the tar and back on our heels, while politicians truncate the process and pick their constituents. We've been told, contact your state representatives to advocate for a fair process. I chose to come in person today, since one of my representatives told me to my face he does not represent me. Not the best overture to a prospective correspondent, much less a constituent. We need the Fair Maps Act and a Citizens Commission to draw fair districts. Until then, make this process more open and thorough and keep sight of the ultimate goal: one person, one vote.
Next is Priya Palmer. In the on-deck circle is Ron Katz.
Good afternoon, members of the Redistricting Committee. My name is Priya Palmer, and I'm a resident of Catawba County. I'm here today in support of my fellow residents in North Carolina to ask for a fair and transparent process for these redistricting proceedings. A fair and transparent process would include additional hearings before and after the release of proposed maps, ample notice for the promotion of these additional hearings so that there is substantial public involvement across the state, have both in-person and video streaming options, hold the hearings during a variety of hours, provide translation services and information accessible to those who may not speak English as a primary language, and provide a reasonable public comment period to give the public an opportunity to voice suggestions about the proposed maps. In summary, citizen participation and access at all levels and steps of the process must be a priority so that the maps produced result in fair, effective, and accountable representation for all people in North Carolina. Thank you.
Ron Katz. And the next speaker after Mr. Katz will be Tiffany Canaday.
First, thank you for the opportunity to speak. For background, I consider myself to be a voting rights advocate. I've been involved for many years with a number of nonpartisan organizations, both in the North Carolina mountains and statewide, working to advocate for better access to voting for all eligible to vote, as well as fair maps. I am registered unaffiliated. I am here today, traveling about 75 minutes from my home in the West, to ask this committee and the North Carolina General Assembly to do one thing. Please create fair maps. I define fair maps as those that provide opportunities for all who wish to run for office, a realistic chance for election, and for voters to have real chances to elect someone that shares their values. When unfair maps are created, too many races for office are predetermined, with one political party and candidate having a significantly better chance to win than their opponents. In a state that is considered purple, it should mean that delegations from North Carolina to the U.S. House should be close to evenly divided. In fact, in 2022, the number of Democrats and Republicans elected were evenly divided, 7 from each party. Will that be the case after the 2024 election? In a democracy, it is important to have all opinions expressed, respected, and considered. I am concerned that this will not be the case when maps were drawn for both the North Carolina General Assembly and U.S. House this year. As a person of faith, I ask you to have faith in democracy and the people of this state and draw maps that give people real choices. Thanks again for this opportunity, and to each of you, thanks for your service to the state of North Carolina.
Next speaker is Tiffany Kennedy, and after that will be Denise Guyette.
Members of the Redistricting Committee, I am Tiffany Canaday, a resident of Hickory and president of the League of Women Voters, Catawba Valley. While I would like to speak substantively to the issue of redistricting, I'm unable to do so due to the unavailability of maps on which to comment. Instead, I wish to address the procedure of this and the other 2 statewide public hearings. I find the scheduling of these meetings to be inconvenient, obscure, and hasty. The notice of public meetings was published only 1 week preceding the first scheduled meeting and not widely publicized. I find this to lack the elements of transparency and accountability. Furthermore, the scheduling of only 3 hearings in the entire state of North Carolina excludes many residents. The timing of these meetings at 4 p.m. is inconvenient for those who work and/or have children, and only one of the meetings is available to live stream. Finally, the lack of available maps on which to comment makes substantive testimony impossible. All of this brings the question of your intent and purpose with these hearings. We would request appropriate, timely notice, inclusive hearings, and transparency regarding the redistricting process. Most importantly, we request equitable, fair maps without racial or political bias, which truly represent the communities in which we live. Thank you for your consideration of my comments.
Next is Denise Guyette.
Good afternoon. My name is Denise Guyette. I am a resident and taxpayer of Catawba County. I take my civic duty to vote very seriously, so this is why I'm so disappointed to learn of this hearing only 1 week ago and from a nonpartisan group. I did not receive any notice from any of the legislators. Furthermore, where are the maps? How can I properly testify in a hearing when the main topic is not disclosed? How can anyone be a good citizen of North Carolina when we do not know how the process works? Voting is a civic duty, and the voters should be able to choose their representatives and not the other way around. I demand a better process in the hearings to come. I ask that after the maps are available, that you host hearings after traditional work hours and provide virtual and multi-language options for testimony. Thank you for your time.
I think I forgot to tell you who was on deck. So it's Reverend Corinne Mack is the next speaker, and then on deck will be Harry Taylor.
Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Corinne Mack, president of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg NAACP. I stand on the shoulders of a great man, Dr. Martin Luther King. So I want to read what he said in 1957 as he led the fight for voter rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer plead to the federal government for passage of anti-lynching law. We will, by the power of our vote, write the law in the statute books of the South and bring an end to the dastardly acts of the hooded perpetrators of violence. It took him 8 years to finally get the voter rights act passed. My concern is, as you can see, as a black woman, that what is happening here in the state of North Carolina is no different from 1957. I don't see hoods, but the hood of the night of the actions that hurt people of color every single day, that disenfranchise the residents of this state, and quite frankly, attacks every intersection of our lives. It's disgusting. As a woman of God, God is very clear about what he does and what he believes and what we should believe based on the word of God. I'm looking at people right now who's looking at all of us as if we're just indivisible. But I promise you, leadership matters. And leaders are transparent, they're truthful, they're honest, and they're open to listen. We're asking for listening sessions all over this state, transparency all over this state, and for God's sake, where's the love?
Next speaker, Harry Taylor. In the on-deck circle, Rachel Pollard.
I'm Harry Taylor. I'm a 35-year citizen of Charlotte, and I'm here speaking for myself today. Courtesy of the egregious decision by your in-house state Supreme Court earlier this year, we're here to speak, comment, and offer recommendations on more election district maps. It's a good bet the new maps have already been drawn in secret and are now hidden deep within somebody's computer and are rigged to the hilt. Recent history tells us that nothing said during these 3 days of testimony will have impact other than what you might parse out to use for propaganda at some future time. In truth, we're only in this room so you can proclaim that the public was offered an opportunity to weigh in. Through ruthless voter suppression, clumsy propaganda, and never-ending assaults on public education, you'll soon hammer the final nails into the coffin of democracy, seal it in a sarcophagus, and dump it in under a pyramid someplace. Curious that. My copy of the state constitution reads, all political power is vested and derived from the people. All government of right originates from the people and is founded upon their will. You rise each morning, stick one of those little buttons on your lapels, flag, or some sign of your office, and you go out in the day to destroy democracy that doesn't belong to you. A common car thief would go to jail for 8 years or 16 years or 20 years. A democracy thief pulls the ladder up from behind him and keeps going, keeps stealing, winning elections under gerrymandered maps. I thank you for allowing me to speak today, but based on your vision of absolute control, it may be the last time we are afforded such a courtesy. I cannot begin to tell you how sad it makes me feel that fellow citizens of mine in the state of North Carolina would do this to me and 10.5 million other citizens.
Next is Rachel Pollard, and the next speaker after Ms. Pollard will be Perry David.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Pollard, and I live in Hendersonville in Henderson County. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak and for your consideration of what I have to say. I've come here today not to speak on the part of any political party or otherwise distinct group of voters. I have come here to speak briefly, because it's really very simple, on behalf of every North Carolinian and really every American voter. It's easy for those of us who are not in power to ask those of you who are in power to put your morality, ethics, and Christian values above political expediency. But that is exactly what I am asking you to do. And I'm asking you to do it to preserve our American democratic way of life. I have little hope, however, and after reading that as part of the budget bill passed the other day, the provision overturning previous state law that made legislators redistricting communications and drafting documents part of the raw public record once new maps became law was included in the budget bill, I have even less hope. So that being said, along with all of the other rational, common sense, good government, love of democracy, and USA requests here this afternoon, I ask you simply, as the Christians I believe you all are, what would Jesus do? It's absolutely impossible for me to believe that he would condone, no less promote, drawing maps to rig elections so that your candidates win. The time will come when we have to account for our actions on earth. Please take that into account now. Thank you.
Next speaker is Perry David, and in the on-deck circle is Jan Kerry.
Hi, I'm Perry David. I'm from Henderson County. I'd like to say there is a new voter fraud going on in North Carolina now. The North Carolina Republican legislators are lying when they say there was an election fraud in 2020, and they need to fix it now. There was none. Even the twice impeached ex-president's officials have said that the 2020 election was the most secure in history. North Carolina Republican legislators have been trying to confuse us, make it harder to do a mail-in ballot, reducing the days to vote, and trying voter IDs again. These actions make it more difficult for homebound and working voters while damaging democracy. Voters may give up trying to figure this out and stop voting, and maybe that's the point. In 2019, an opinion running more than 350 pages, the judges said Republican state legislators had employed surgical precision to dilute Democratic voters' strength, ensuring their party would control both chambers of the legislature. They are at it again. North Carolina may now have one of the most repressive voting systems in the country. The GOP talk of securing the vote is meant to prevent free, fair voting. When fear is used to cheat, no one wins. To make democracy stronger, we need more voting, not less. Unless, of course, your goal is to destroy democracy in North Carolina based on a lie. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jan Kerry, and then following Mr. Kerry will be Ron Moxley.
Good evening. My name is Jan Carey. I'm a retired disabled combat veteran, having served over 20 years and deployed to 3 different combat zones. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I understand that nothing said here will impact the upcoming map, but I wanted to thank you ahead of time for the gerrymandered maps we will soon be seeing. It's nice to see that the truly representative government that I stood watch over for over 20 years will shortly be a thing of the past, giving the far right an even greater chance of furthering their destructive agenda can only result in an expedited death of our democracy. As a result of the upcoming undemocratic election, my children will continue to experience some of the stressors that I experienced while in combat. They get to wake up every morning wondering if this is the day that they will be shot. A little PTSD never hurt anybody, huh? I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak. And to my fellow Democrats, Senator Mayfield, continue the fight, as will I. I'm sorry, you too. All of my fellow Democrats. I know Senator Mayfield personally. Thank you.
So next speaker is Ron Moxley, and then it will be Mary Espinoza.
What he said. Thank you for providing this public forum as it is. I'm Ron Moxley from High Point, an AOTL member representing myself. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. Well, I have a dream of an independent redistricting commission, as many states have gone to, and hopefully that will end the shenanigans of Republicans and Democrats, because it's happened on both watches, but that doesn't make it right. I live in the Triad, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point. We're one big community. We share news, schools, health care. We socialize together. We go to shows, music, restaurants. We should never be divided into 3 or 4 districts for the purpose of voting. And there are other metropolitan areas in the state where that's the case too. Please remember that I want fair maps for all of this state. We have a Democratic governor elected by at least half the voters in this state. Under the 2010 gerrymandered maps, only 1/4, as you've heard before, of the seats congressionally were Democrats. The latest court-ordered maps created a much fairer balance, but now we face more redrawn maps. Will it be 2010 all over? That's going to be the question. Like a lot of my colleagues here, I suspect so. But I can only ask, be fair, be transparent, follow the Voting Rights Act, don't discriminate against minorities, and respect your diverse voting public. We're watching, and we will respond in every way that we possibly can. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Mary Espinoza, and after Ms. Espinoza will be Julie Klein.
Hello, my name is Maria Jose Espinoza, and I'm here from Kannapolis, North Carolina, in Cabarrus County. Open and transparent redistricting is not only fundamental to a representative democracy, but it is also crucial to strengthening trust in our elected officials and government. The recent actions and inactions of legislative leaders make us deeply concerned that the NCGA will once again fail at its responsibility to create a robust, transparent, and thoughtful process for receiving vital public input to draw new maps, as many have mentioned here with me today. It is clear even with this hearing, held on a Wednesday with 1 week notice during the workday, surrounded by armed guards, and only a handful more throughout the state like this one, what the intentions of our legislative leaders are in the redrawing process and who they intend on cutting out of this process yet again. The NCGA has an opportunity in 2023 to provide genuine openness, transparency, and the opportunity for North Carolinians like myself to engage in a process that will impact their elections in the decade to come. We urge you today to make the promise of democracy real by leading a redistricting process that creates voting plans reflective of the actual demographics and communities that live within the state, our values, our interests, and the needs of North Carolinians. Every day, North Carolinians must be able to map their own future, and currently only you have the power to make this a reality. I hope you listen.
Next speaker is Julie Klein, and then in the on deck circle will be Jim Saintsing.
Hi, I am Julie Klein. I'm from Hickory, my hometown. And having lived in the Catawba County, I'm familiar with having cities split into more than one congressional district. Being in the same district with other counties that seem like strange geographic companions. The explanation that I would like most to hear at some point is why the new state budget changes the state law about being able to access heretofore public records regarding most of the communications leading up to redistricting maps being drawn. This is, in essence, repeals the current state law. I would be interested in the rationale for hiding the process of redistricting. When I combine that with the fact that this is only one of 3 meetings in the entire state, as a few others have mentioned, a reduction of many meetings from others that have happened in the past, it appears that somebody doesn't think voters care about the redistricting process or about transparency. Non-gerrymandered electoral maps are the root of representative democracy. I think I'll say that again. Non-gerrymandered electoral maps are the root of representative democracy, and rotten roots equal a dying tree. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jim Saintsing, and then on deck will be Jane Yokoyama.
My name is Jim Saintsing. I live in Greensboro. I'm here to speak for myself and other voters who oppose political gerrymandering. I was registered Republican for over 30 years, and I always despised the gerrymandering that was practiced by Democrats at the time. Now I'm unaffiliated, and I still despise political gerrymandering. To be clear, gerrymandering has become worse since 2010 because of the surgical precisions Republicans have used, coupled with equally surgical voter suppression laws. What do we have a right to as citizens in a democracy? Compact districts, metropolitan areas that are held together throughout the federal congressional districts and not drawn to keep one party in power. I really don't want to repeat of the bad joke of a district that got drawn in a recent cycle that rambled from my house in Greensboro to Virginia Fox's house in Boone. I also don't want to repeat of the finger in the eye to Guilford County voters in general and our black citizens in particular when we got the division of the North Carolina A&T University campus as well as the whole county between 2 congressional districts. So in my particular residential area, we should keep the triad together. That is Greensboro, High Point, and as much of Winston-Salem as is possible within the population constraints. But these are general considerations. We need to see the maps and have another set of hearings after we have a chance to review those maps. I expect everybody remembers David Lewis's famous statement that electing more Republicans is better for the country. Well, I hope we also remember the Declaration of Independence that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Thank you.
Next is Jane Yokoyama, and in the on-deck circle is Steve Ivester.
Thank you. My name is Jane Yokoyama, and I am an unaffiliated voter in Precinct 2.1 of Buncombe County. Thanks to the last maps, I am happy that Asheville and most of Buncombe County are now in the same district, so thank you. I am here to speak about the transparency and fairness of the redistricting process. I have been to 3 redistricting hearings in Western North Carolina. Each time I have had to drive over 90 minutes to attend packed-filled rooms like this. Each time I have heard people who have traveled longer, and each time by both parties they have said, we need to change the times and locations to make them more convenient. There were no Spanish translators and no Spanish interpreters there, even though they were offered for free. And look, nothing has changed. Okay, and they offered to do it for free. The current public hearing process makes it difficult for regular folks like me to be heard, and our votes really count for something. The hearings should be held before and after maps are created. Sufficient notice of hearings should be given, not just 1 week. It should also include major metropolitan districts. It should allow comments to be made by phone and mail. Finally, maps should be drawn so they do not favor incumbents, but reflect the boundaries of like communities. You are good people who know the difference between sense and nonsense. Do the right and fair thing when creating the maps and process. The people of North Carolina deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Next, Steve Ivester. On deck is Leslie Carey.
I will be brief. I'm Steve Ivester. I live in Catawba County. I was raised and went to high school in Burke County. By whatever process you arrive at maps, I hope that MSAs will be held intact. The unifor of Burke, Catawba, Caldwell, and Alexander, and I want to include Airedale too, but I can't, but is a powerhouse. It has been an economic powerhouse. When I was a kid, we had furniture, we had textiles, we had cut and sew, we had cabling, we had electromechanical assembly. Now we have very little. But our unifor MSA has been broken up. Now, right now, it just happens that Caldwell is the only one that's separate from the others. But I do hope that in your process, you will keep the Hickory Metro MSA intact. I include Airedale, too, because one of the real challenges of the last 2 years was when Charlotte tried to take the whole Piedmont water system over by taking water out of the Catawba River. So I think it's important that these mid-Piedmont counties stay together, protect our waterways. The Catawba River is a beautiful asset, and keep the Hickory MSA together. Thank you.
Next is Leslie Carey. On deck is Kimberly Turk.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Carey. I'm the first vice chair for Henderson County. I'm also one of the founding members for the Jewish Democrats of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and I'm the former district chair for NC11. Firstly, I would like to formally request that at least one of these public hearings be further west in the future. If it's going to be labeled that it's a west public hearing, let's make it there. But we happily drove 90 minutes east to really ask you to please uphold democracy. And maybe a trip out west would do you some good so you could see how badly people are hurting living out there under a lot of the Republican policy. People can't afford daycare, people work all the time, and they are struggling. A lot of hospitals closed because it took so long for Medicaid to get expanded. And a lot of some of the only things that seem to be saving some of these towns is actually money that has come from the American Rescue Plan. So, you know, the Republican Party likes to say that they are a party for small government, but I can't think of anything with more government overreach than putting your thumb so heavily on the scale. and drawing unfair maps. So if you really want to be a small government and family value party, then draw fair maps, let people have their voices, let us decide what we want for ourselves. Thank you.
Next is Kimberly Turk. Okay. And then Ben Henderson, you will be on deck.
I'm Kimberly Turk. I have lived in Hickory for 26 years. North Carolina is a state that elects a Democratic governor while simultaneously handing its presidential electoral votes to a Republican, illustrating the political diversity and balance of our state. And yet one party has an overwhelming, disproportionate majority in our state legislature. The history of North Carolina politics includes gerrymandering by both Democrats and Republicans. But over the last few years, this effort has resulted in the votes of many of our citizens being muted. This has allowed a vocal minority to control the state's budget, propose laws that are unconstitutional, and disrupt our schools with laws that go against professional ethics. For the people, by the people means all of our votes should matter. We should have the opportunity to be represented by someone who reflects our views. The will of the people should control our state, not unscrupulous politicians trying to hold on to power. It is past time to use statistics and science to draw our districts. Let the researchers at Harvard, Duke, Colorado College, Dartmouth, Princeton, and the many other universities studying redistricting algorithms provide guidance to a nonpartisan committee. It's time for North Carolina to promote our excellent public education system by allowing math and science to guide our redistricting.
Ben Henderson. Next will be Doug Auer.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Henderson. I've lived in the Blue Ridge precinct of Watauga County for over 40 years. Most recently, my family has become a victim of partisan gerrymandering when my precinct was moved to Caldwell County. I'm a tax-paying citizen. I'm just representing myself here and my family, and I've always followed state and local politics. Unlike in the past, I no longer know my state representative or senator, and they don't know me. And frankly, I don't know that they care. These hearings are nothing more than shams. Holding these hearings with such little notice so that voters have no time to prepare in only 3 locations in the state so that citizens must travel great distances to have their voices heard, and at a time of day when most working people are unable to attend is an affront to every citizen of this state. I can assure you we see through this charade. It is also, I might add, fiscally irresponsible. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. By holding these sham hearings, you can claim that you've heard from the voters. In reality, you've insulted every voter in this state. These sham hearings, you've told us our opinions don't matter. By holding these sham hearings, you've told us our opinions don't matter, and by extension, neither do our votes. These days, we expect such voter suppression by authoritarian government, but not by our own state legislature. Your actions are an affront to the citizens of the state, be they Republican or Democrat, white or black, old or young, male or female. To conclude, I offer a quote from a speech by someone you've heard of, Ronald Reagan, on October 15th, 1987. That's all we're asking for, an end to the anti-democratic and un-American practice of gerrymandering. Thank you for your time.
Doug Auer, followed by James Kaiser.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the General Assembly. Thank you for holding these redistricting public hearings across the state. My name is Doug Auer. I live in Hickory, and I am the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party 10th Congressional District. I'm going to use a phrase not often associated with our side of the aisle, fair and balanced. Legislative districts drawn fairly and balanced is a worthy goal for the committee and for the people of North Carolina. Political writers refer to North Carolina as a purple state Understanding that descriptive, I looked at a handful of statewide races spanning the last decade or so: U.S. President, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, U.S. Senate. Excepting a couple of outliers, most of the contests fell in the range of 47 to 52%, whether a Democrat won or a Republican won. That's right, the trend line shows that the winner carrying about 50% to 52% of the vote, and the loser 47 to 48%. Generally, the margin of victory was less than 200,000 votes. The headline: at the statewide level, the results are pretty moderate, with a little more than half voting for the winner and a little less than half voting for the loser. Well, how should that play out at the House district level? Well, it should look like what it is. We have 7 elected Republicans and 7 elected Democrats. But the state legislative districts, by contrast, are more a product of partisan map-making. North Carolinians will benefit from the State House and the Senate districts drawn consistent with our congressional districts. Statewide, we see moderated tempered voting within a range of 47 to 52%. The current U.S. House maps reflect the state's evenly divided electorate. This redistricting committee and the NCGA as a whole must create legislative districts that respect the temperament of North Carolinians, fair and balanced. Thank you.
James Kaiser, followed by Bob Anderson.
James Kaiser, Gastonia. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I just want to say that I share the sentiments that have been said over and over about the pitiful inadequacy of the process that has been that we have seen in terms of number of hearings, notice, timing of hearings, and transparency. But I'll skip straight to one criterion, and that is it's high time for North Carolina to end partisan gerrymandering. Sure, gerrymandering has been going on for probably 2 centuries, but today's gerrymandering is not the same as your grandparents' gerrymandering. Advanced geographic software allows geospatial information to relate to voter data, supercharging techniques of cracking and packing. Even small municipalities and communities of common interest are split up. Precincts are divided, neighborhoods bisected, block and street segments split, all so that legislators can maximize the creation of safe districts. In essence, legislators are choosing their voters rather than voters choosing their legislators. So how do you do away with this? The only way I see is to create an independent, balanced commission, as has been done in other states, to handle districting. And so what do you do in the meantime? You could do that for 2030, but in the meantime, how do you address the congressional districts? And I say your solution is right before you, and that is the remedial maps that were done. And it's been pointed out, it yielded 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans, and 3 African Americans in our congressional delegation. And if you ask me, that's pretty fairly balanced when you look at the registration being 35% Democratic and 30% Republican and 34% unaffiliated. Thank you.
Bob Anderson. Next would be Cheryl Swafford.
Hello, my name is Bob Anderson. I reside in Cabarrus County. I am unaffiliated. I would like to begin by addressing the redistricting meeting schedule. In my opinion, you can do better in giving the citizens of North Carolina an opportunity to weigh in to such an important topic. When I was told that you have scheduled just 3 sessions for our more than 7 million voters, my reaction was, can that be true? Really? This abbreviated schedule denies a great majority of North Carolina citizens the opportunity to attend one of these meetings. This is wrong. A 5-year-old knows this is wrong. I suspect you know this is wrong. You say you represent the North Carolina citizens as a whole. Then give all the citizens of North Carolina a better opportunity to be heard. It's not often that Republicans, Democrats, and Independents come together, but that is exactly what is happening in North Carolina on the topic of gerrymandering. According to a new survey conducted by Public Policy Polling, 59% of Republicans, 72% of Democrats, and 63% of unaffiliated North Carolina voters say gerrymandering needs to end. On a personal level, I have asked Democrats, Republicans, and independent voters about this issue, and they all have overwhelmingly told me they want gerrymandering to end. I am asking you to reconsider support for House Bill number 9 that was introduced on January 25th of this year, or a similar bill that would adopt an independent redistricting process and would establish the North Carolina Citizens Redistricting Committee. It would be nonpartisan, have full transparency, and have public input. Have the courage to stand up for what is right. Have the courage to end gerrymandering in North Carolina. And I want you to remember this number, 100%. So far, all the speakers today, 100% are against gerrymandering. Thank you.
Cheryl Swafford. Next will be Kevin Silva.
I'm Cheryl Swafford. The Republican fascists in our General Assembly are a disgrace to a democratic society. What little democracy we have left that my Army Ranger and Green Beret son fought for at war over 4 years, you will likely try to diminish again with your seditious gerrymandering to empower Republicans rather than the majority of the voters. Republicans have prevented Medicaid expansion for many years. You've shamefully held it hostage this year, pending approval of your unseen budget. Republicans defunded needy North Carolina public schools this year to put school vouchers in the hands of those who don't need them. Even the rich get the vouchers. That's a shame. Our country is at risk of the Electoral College re-electing in 2024, as in 2016, a fascist, racist, bigot, criminal, con man, liar against the will of millions of American voters. Hillary got nearly 3 million more popular votes nationwide. People like Republicans in the North Carolina General Assembly shamefully tried to aid and abet her loss. Trump got 74 more electoral votes and became president. That's a disgrace. Your job is to serve all the people of North Carolina. Do your job. Be fair, not fascist. Thank you.
Kevin Silva. Kevin Silva, and then next would be David Ely.
Hello, my name is Kevin Silva. I live, vote, and pay taxes in Mitchell County. I've been a North Carolina resident for 39 years. As a voting member of the public, I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts. I've written them down so I get through them and respect the time. I drove an hour and a half to get here because this is important. My hope is that a process will be used to deliver fair, straightforward maps for all elections. I'm concerned with the increasing polarization in the country and in our state. It's not a good sign. We all seem to decry it, but then we do something to further it and feed it. I want maps that count my vote in a way that makes it no more or less valuable than any other vote cast by any civically engaged citizen in North Carolina. Whether it's a farmer down east, a mother of two living in the South Park neighborhood of Raleigh, a multimillionaire investor in Charlotte, I don't care. We're the same. It should count the same. Our map should provide a level playing field so candidates can compete for my vote based on their ideas, on their policies, on their solutions, on creative and innovative thinking. I do not vote because you have an R or a D next to your name. I don't care. We now have the technology to draw maps with surgical precision. Let's use that precision to provide fairness, not advantage. In closing, I want to register my concern with provisions on the just-passed budget that exempts legislators from complying with state open records law that requires redistricting documents be done in public. That's not a good sign. Voters should choose their representatives, not have political parties choose their voters. Thank you.
David Ely, and then next would be Matt Sadinsky.
So it was important to me to be here for this. Thank you. Drove 2 hours from Mebane because this was the only meeting I could get to, given the schedule and the locations. So to the obvious, elections have consequences. As a voter, I'm well aware of this. And as someone who believes in the process, I accept this. But my hopes are not pinned on the obvious. My hopes are pinned on the idea that you, as representatives, would do just that, represent. In a primary, you pay close attention to your base. I get that. But once you're in office, you're supposed to represent everyone, not just your base. And I'm challenging you as a voter, as a fellow citizen, as someone who believes in our country, draw districts that are fair and not gerrymander. If your governing philosophy is right and good, then draw for fair districts and let the voters decide and let the chips fall where they may. Gerrymandered districts are proof that those who authored them do not believe or trust in their own constituents. Show me, show us all, that you believe in your own people more than power, money, or influence. Show the courage our forebears demonstrated in writing our Constitution in the first place. Do what is not obvious nowadays and be representatives that actually represent. Again, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope we have more of these.
Okay. Next is Matt Sadinsky, and then the next speaker would be Karen Smith.
My name is Matthew Sadinsky, and I'm the president of the North Carolina Democratic Jewish Caucus. I live, work, and vote in Catawba County. I'm the father of 5 adult children and a small business owner for 20 years. To earn a living, I put veterans, graduates, and professionals to work in cities, utilities, and infrastructure, helping pave the way to transition to clean energy. I live in Precinct 41 in Catawba County, the 10th Congressional District, North Carolina House 89, and the 45th Senate District. I'm old enough to have learned that it is better to ask the right question than to think I have all the answers. So I ask you, just because you can do a thing, is it the right thing to do? As lawyers, legislators, and citizens, you took an oath to do honest work in a framework of ethics. Does your ethical duty to all your constituents carry the same burden that lawyers have to zealously represent the interests of their clients and avoid conflicts of interest? What are the consequences of your actions? What are your ethical and moral obligations to your constituents, the citizens of 100 counties and 14 congressional districts? I suggest to you that redrawing maps that have already been ruled unfair because you can is serving your own interests. Just because you can do a thing, is it the right thing to do? Stacked and packed district maps disfranchise minorities and women who want and need you to speak for them about Medicare, childcare, funding for education, schools, teachers, and correction officer salaries, responsible gun ownership, and sound energy climate legislation. Congressional districts ought to represent the populations that elect them, not carve the districts to press an advantage because you can. As you move down this path to gerrymander 7 blue and 7 red districts to 10 red and 4 blue, ask yourself, what are the consequences? Whose voices are you silencing? Who loses? Just because you can do a thing, is it the right thing to do? Thank you.
Next is Karen Smith, and on deck circle would be Michael McLam.
Good afternoon, Assembly members. Thank you for being here. My name is Karen Smith. I'm the 3rd Vice Chair of the 11th Congressional District Democrats. I'm here to read a statement on behalf of Katie Dean, our chair. She's sorry she cannot be with you today, but this hearing was scheduled during work hours outside the 11th district, and like many hardworking people, she was unable to be with you today because she is at work. She believes, as we all do, I think, in this room, that fair elections are the cornerstone of American democracy. Without fair elections and fairly drawn districts, we silence the voices of hardworking people not born to privilege, wealth, or influence. On behalf of the people of our beautiful, gorgeous Western North Carolina district, I demand that the majority party draw fair maps for the people of North Carolina. The long-standing history of partisan gerrymandering in our state undermines the sacred democratic principles of our republic. Citizens have a right to choose their elected leaders. Unfortunately, all too often it's the other way around. Politicians are picking their voters, allowing politicians to stay in power with little oversight or accountability to the people. What are you afraid of? Elections should be competitive. Let the best candidates and the best ideas prevail. When the party in power puts a thumb on the scale to rig the system in their favor, the people lose faith in democracy. This is not in keeping with the values of our nation. We assert that you should put the people of North Carolina above your own political ambition. We assert that you should put the interests of the people above the interests of your party. To achieve the goal of fair maps, we propose you create a Citizens Redistricting Commission that equally represents Republican, Democratic, or unaffiliated voters, free from the interests of lobbyists and wealthy donors. In doing so, outline specific benchmarks for the commission, such as drawing districts that are equal in population and have contiguous boundaries, as well as avoiding the splitting of counties, municipalities, and communities of interest. Thank you.
Michael McLam, and on deck would be Flavia Dietrich.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael McLam. I reside in Hickory and am the chair of the Catawba County Democratic Party. Thank you for choosing Hickory as one of your 3 public hearings, and I'm glad all of us were able to come together on such short notice. We don't know what the maps are, if they're made, but we do know a few things. Our districts in North Carolina should be equal in population, contiguous, and compact. Our legislators need to represent those in their district. Is North Carolina red or blue? Who knows? It may depend on the day. 50-50 is pretty accurate. Our current congressional districts reflect North Carolina, 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans. The same cannot be said for our state legislative districts. Should Republicans hold a supermajority in the General Assembly? No, not in a 50-50 state. Your committees should strive to create districts that represent all of North Carolina. Our maps should be fair and balanced. That may mean candidates and incumbents will have to work harder to be elected, but isn't working hard how we move forward. North Carolina is a great place to live and work. Let's not contaminate it with the gerrymandering and out-of-touch politicians acting in the dark. Thank you.
Flavia Dietrich. Next would be Angelica Wind.
I'm Flavia Dietrich, resident of Terrell, Congressional District 10, NC Senate 45, NC House 89. And I came here to speak to redistricting, but how can any substantive comments be made if you haven't released any maps? Not only are there no maps, but there have not been divulged criteria that will be used to redistrict. And I really have little hope that the very gerrymandered NCGA that was gerrymandered to give absolute power to Republicans will follow the basic rules of redistricting, such as fair representation for residents, no arbitrary or discriminatory boundaries, as was recommended by U.S. Congress. And when I look at the map drawn by this legislature in the recent past, it is very clear that the legislature, the majority, doesn't want voters to choose their representatives, but rather that representatives choose their voters. When you look at this map in 2022, the one that was proposed for U.S. Congress would have 50% of the vote going to Democrats, but only 4 of the 14 seats, which was already said before. This situation was rectified, only for the U.S. Congress, by the NC Supreme Court. and it should stay rectified, representing our current votes 7-7. It doesn't bode well that this is one of only 3 hearings held statewide before any maps are drawn at a time inconvenient for anyone who works, scheduled at short notice. I assume the hope was maybe that no one would show up, but we the people are here, and we will hold legislatures accountable. Thank you.
Angelica Wind. Hi. On deck would be Stephen Baumol.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Angelica Wind, and I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I would like to tell you that I had this whole wonderful speech prepared. There have been lots of wonderful speeches, but the reality is I didn't have time to prepare one. And the reason is because I did not find out about this hearing until yesterday afternoon, and I was fortunate enough to be able to sign up for a public comment. But this is just a part of my journey of being here. The other part that required me as a single parent is to find childcare to drive over an hour to get here. And now I have to drive back, and hopefully I'll have time to help my daughter with her homework. And I tell you all this around my journey is because I want y'all to know what it took for me to get here so that my voice is heard, because my voice is important. And as a North Carolinian, I have a right for it to be heard. The reality is that this hearing is neither transparent nor accessible. There was no adequate notice, and if any, it was done electronically. And I come from the West, which in turn means that a lot of our folks do not have access to internet and have no way of having their voice heard. In addition, the date and time are not accessible. If you truly stand for what is right for North Carolina, you will create hearings that are on the weekends where working folks can show up and have their voice heard. If you choose to have a hearing that's supposedly bringing in Western North Carolina voices, you will choose to have them in the West, and that because this is not Western North Carolina. In addition to folks that have no transportation, you will provide the ability of having hearings in spaces where people can travel to. I just want to point out that even the fact that you had it in this space was not accessible. When I got here, I found 4 other people that were lost, 4 other folks that were not necessarily as mobile, and y'all, because of this space, they had to walk not only a long distance from the parking lot here, but we had to walk all around the building, go down some stairs just to come here. We can do better. I know that you can do better. Our voices deserve to be heard, and we deserve to have just and fairly drawn maps. I ask that you please let our voices be heard, all of our voices. Thank you.
Stephen Baumol.
Yeah, I spell it usually. Thank you.
Followed by Lisa Swinson.
I would appreciate it if there's more than 3 names tags. I don't know who everybody is. But at any rate, maybe there's a reason for that. I am a retired lawyer, but a born-again political activist. And as I look around here, there's a lot of them here. And you know, growing up in the 60s, I'm older than I look, there was a saying, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Well, you know what's equally terrible? I'll tell you, because apparently some of you don't know. Our democracy. Fannie Willis in Georgia knows about it. Jack Smith knows about it. And I hope soon some lawyers and former officials will know about it. And I do hope that most of the people know who Jim Valvano is. The former basketball coach of NC State. I'm a northerner who loves the South now. But Valvano's famous for saying, as he was dying of cancer, don't give up, never give up. As I look and hear the people in this room, we will never give up protecting our democracy. Too many people have died in wars Thank you to the veterans here. I hope the folks have nice retirement funds because you won't be in office very long. Thank you.
Lise Swinson. Next would be Stella Anderson.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Swinson, and I've lived in Hickory for almost 20 years now. Thank you, Assembly members, for the opportunity for me to speak. And I also want to thank Representative Jay Adams and his staff. I called them as soon as I heard about this. I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do, and they gave me that information. So thank you, Jay. The agenda I found online said the goal was to gather public comment for the 2023 redistricting process. However, as you've heard, this last-minute announcement timeframe indicates to me and a lot of us here that public comment is actually not what your priority was. Additionally, only 3 seemingly hastily pulled together hearings, meetings were set up in 3 places, and it's not working. I looked up online, and it says the U.S. Census Bureau says that we have an estimated 10.9 million people in our state and 7.4 million registered voters. And so we had 3 meetings. When I taught civics at Camden High School in 1974, I was 23 years old then. I never would have believed that I would be standing here trying to figure out this gerrymandering process that seems to be attempting to set North Carolina voting regulations for the next 10 years. As the governor of this state wrote in August, this legislation has nothing to do with election security and everything to do with Republicans keeping and gaining power. My time is up, but I do hope that you will include what our governor said in his veto letter with the minutes of this meeting, because they're very important and they're so well written. Thank you again.
Stella Anderson. On deck would be Sharon Everhart.
My name is Stella Anderson, and I'm providing public comment today on behalf of the Watauga County Voting Rights Task Force. We advocate for the voting rights of all, regardless of partisan affiliation. We stand against any form of voter suppression. When the legislature produces a gerrymandered redistricting map, this diminishes the voting power of some while advantaging others. In the 2022 redistricting, the courts forced you, the powers that be in the current legislature, to enact a congressional district map that resulted in the election of 7 Republican and 7 Democratic congressional representatives. This result actually reflected the near 50-50 results of our statewide elections for many years running. Yet you prevailed in the maps of the state house and state districts, producing a supermajority in both chambers. The proof is in the pudding. Gerrymandered districts, whether the result of racial or partisan gerrymanders, are not legitimate. You are kept in power through illegitimate means. Actually, we've come to expect nothing but this from the current powers that be in the legislature. It is apparent the only remedy for voters will come from groups spending money on litigation in courts. We can only hope we will see you in court, and not state court, because you have an ultimate solution in your newly obtained control over our state Supreme Court. The powers that be are completely predictable, dishing out nothing less than total control over state government, packing and cracking certain voters, giving Republicans an outsized impact on our election outcomes. Embarrassing for our state for sure, but the powers that be evidently have no shame.
Sharon Everhart. On deck is Cynthia Costanoble.
Hi, I'm Sharon Everhart, and I live in Morganton. I want to applaud you for your bravery in sitting here. I noticed that some of you are happier than others, and that's the way life goes, I guess. What I would propose is that the simplest thing to do is get yourself off the hot spot and use the advantage of artificial intelligence and our great scientific community here in North Carolina to set things up so that you don't have to be involved with it. Because I think people really expect that some things are going to change and would like to see that. And I hope you will support that issue. Thank you.
Cynthia Costanoble. On deck, Betty Lohr.
My name is Cynthia Costanoble from Denver, North Carolina, representing Lincoln County. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today to share my position on the redistricting of North Carolina boundaries is heard, considered, and documented. I come from districts 10, 44, and 97. Regarding the hearings that have been convened, I object to the short one-week notice, the fact that there are only 3 hearings in the entire state of North Carolina with a population of over 10 million, and the inconvenient time of 4 p.m. Many of my neighbors and friends were unable to attend due to time constraints, work, daunting travel time, and childcare. This hearing set in Hickory, 90 minutes from Charlotte in Mecklenburg County, makes it indefensible that the committee has no desire to hear from or represent your constituents in the largest urban area of the state of North Carolina. Yet I am happy some of those residents made it here tonight. In 2021, there were 13 hearings set across the state, and prior to that, there were 62. These hearings need to be there needs to be public portals for comments and opportunity for virtual representation of citizens. With no proposed maps available to view makes my future comments difficult and assumptive. So with all the above stated, my personal assumption is that there is a clear effort from this committee to use both partisan and racial gerrymandering to redraw the maps with the intent on suppressing the Democrat vote and votes from people of color. I am hopeful you will act in the best interest of all citizens. From the great state of North Carolina, however, considering the supermajority of the Republican Party and the decision to defy a fairly representative Supreme Court decision in 2022, these hearings will have no impact. Maps will not represent the voices of the majority of your constituents. Please prove me wrong. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Betty Lohr. On deck is Carol Anderson.
My name is Betty Lohr, and I am a resident of Catawba County and a retired North Carolina public school teacher. The foundation of any relationship is trust, and the trust between the legislature and the people has eroded in North Carolina. It doesn't take much to find ways in which that trust has been violated. These hearings are one example, only 3 across the state, and this one rushed and scheduled so that citizens had little time to effectively participate. No maps for discussion or review, little or no transparency in the development of plans that have huge impacts on voting in our state. And let's look at that last concern. This past week, a budget was adopted with a provision that has nothing to do with budget, but everything to do with trust. That provision repealed a previous law that gave the public access to documents and communications of legislators. What once allowed for specific exemptions of disclosure now is a blanket exemption for legislators to withhold any reports or documents as they wish. This will surely affect the process by which maps are drawn. Redistricting is in danger of being another victim of secrecy and backroom planning. That is not the way we build trust. It is not the way to strengthen a democracy that has already become extremely fragile. Rather, such blatant provisions allow legislators to set their own narrative for the public access of documents and undermines the ability of the press to adequately inform us on what is happening in our state. My question to you today is, what are you going to do to rebuild the trust with the people of North Carolina? We depend on your integrity to develop maps that are fair, transparent, and open for debate. Thank you.
Carol Anderson. On deck is Martin Erickson.
My name is Carol Anderson. I live in Concord, just northwest of Charlotte. Concord's a growing community with many needs as our student and residential populations are surging. Like all of our communities, it's important that we have representatives that reflect our needs. With the implementation of gerrymandered districts, we are put at a disadvantage with our representation both in state and federal elections. Please do your best to give us our democratic due by enabling us to elect the representatives that will be knowledgeable of our community's needs. Please consider communities' needs when drawing our district lines and keep these integrated places intact rather than drawing and quartering them. We need people in power positions who have the ability to understand our situation, our needs, and who can represent us well. I implore you to enact the Fair Maps bill, which will serve us well and do us justice. This will free you to do the important work you've been elected to do. You will be fulfilling your legislative duty by voting for the Fair Maps bill, and thus showing your support for a continuation of democratic representation in our state and in our nation. Thank you for listening.
Next is Martin Erickson. On deck is Kyle Brazil.
My name is Martin Erickson, a resident of Cabarrus County. Thank you, senators and representatives, for seeking public input. And I think the representatives deserve name cards, too. I hope you hold similar sessions when maps are proposed. Traditional redistricting principles described by the National Conference of State Legislatures seem fair. Please respect communities of interest with compact districts, also respecting county and municipal boundaries as much as possible. In addition, could you maintain the core of the districts? Voters are confused by the constantly shifting districts that they reside in. Representatives, to the extent you can provide input on the North Carolina House districts, please maintain the districts in Cabarrus as much as possible. They seem fair. I have worked in the administration of elections for many years. Transparency of process ensures faith in the system. Legislation has been passed purporting to increase this transparency. It is reported that Senator Berger says maps will be voted on starting October 9. Since you may choose which records can be disclosed to the public now under current law, please also be transparent in your process. Thank you.
Kyle Brazil. On deck, Brooke Adams.
Good afternoon. I comment today on behalf of NC Counts Coalition, a nonpartisan organization building a healthy, just, and equitable North Carolina through cross-sector partnerships that advance systemic solutions for communities facing systemic barriers. It is not sufficient for the legislature to simply state in its criteria that the committee will adhere to the Voting Rights Act, as was done during our prior redistricting process where the maps were struck down. It must be shown that, in fact, the Voting Rights Act has been complied with. Race must be considered so that the legislature can check its work and know whether district lines are being racist, whether lines drawn are cracking or packing communities, whether district lines are hurting majority-minority districts. And this continues to be a requirement under the laws of this country. In the Milligan case, just decided months ago, the United States Supreme Court rejected the race-neutral approach in Alabama, stating, and I quote, "Section 2 itself demands consideration of race," and further stating, when it comes to considering race in the context of districting, we have made clear that there is a difference between being aware of racial considerations and being motivated by them. There should be a full, transparent, and robust redistricting process, which should include hearings to discuss criteria, hearings to discuss the maps before and after they are drawn. Hearings should be held at appropriate times for community input with sufficient notice. Testimony given at public hearings should be recorded and accessible via the General Assembly's website. Additionally, there should be a public comment portal, and all public comments made via the online comment portal or hotline should be immediately released to the public. States throughout the country are demonstrating how to meaningfully include the public in this process, including here in the South. In July 2021, Alabama lawmakers told their constituents they would hold 30 public hearings, and in Mississippi, lawmakers announced their schedule 3 weeks prior to kicking off their public hearing process. Please use criteria that ensures for fair maps. Thank you.
Brooke Adams, and then Robert Meek Jr. on deck.
Hello, I'm Brooke Adams. I'm the president of the Reproductive Rights Coalition, an organization in Charlotte that fights for everyone's right to bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom. I'm here to express my somewhat dim hope that you will use this redistricting process to expand freedom and democracy in North Carolina. I grew up in a country that represented itself as a beacon of freedom and that stood for the idea of one person, one vote. As I've grown older, I've come to see that we've never really lived up to this representation, but we need to try. Freedom and democracy should always be our North Star. In the past year, I've found myself trying to decide whether to move my family to a state where my children's right to bodily autonomy would be respected, or to stay and fight. But whenever I feel like achieving democracy in North Carolina is hopeless, my friend Betty reminds me of Martin Luther King's words that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. What would justice look like in North Carolina? For one thing, it would mean that every citizen who votes would have their vote counted equally. It would mean that electoral districts would be designed to give voice to the people living there rather than to erase them. It would mean that we would elect leaders who would work for everyone who lives in North Carolina rather than those who can donate enough money. It would mean that my children and your children could live, grow up, and raise their families in a state where they are recognized as our most treasured asset and where their education, health, and freedom are supported and nurtured. It's possible for us to have a public education system that serves all of our children, for us to have clean air and water and the freedom to make our own medical decisions. But we need to be able to vote and have our votes counted. Legislators, I want you to know that we're watching. We saw what you did with the 2023 appropriations bill, allowing you to make your redistricting process muddier rather than more transparent. And I want you to know that your constituents will not rest until we can be assured that when we go to vote, our vote will be counted. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard.
Robert Meek Jr., and the on-deck speaker will be Diane Arbor.
Thank you, sir. I'm Bob Meek. I am chairman of the Republican Party here in Catawba County, so welcome to Catawba County. I was going to speak about my experience being a staffer on 2 members of the U.S. House and 1 senator about the effects of redistricting on congressional staffs. Sitting here listening to mostly people who come from the other side of the aisle, my brothers and sisters, and sitting with one of my Democratic friends over there, Cliff Moore, I'm more concerned about some of the comments that were made here. Cliff is a prior chairman of the Democratic Democrat Party here in Catawba County. And my first vice chair, Bill Shillito, is a former chair of the Republican. Together, they've been working on a movement to try to inject more civility into the political process. As I like to say, we can disagree without being disagreeable. I would say some of the comments today were pretty disagreeable, and some of the name calling. It is hard for me to deal with some of my members of my party when they hear that kind of rhetoric from the other side. So I ask you all, talk to Cliff, talk to Bill, come to their meetings, and I fully support their actions, and let's see if we can't, while we disagree on policy and tone down the rhetoric so that we can get work done. Thank you.
Diane Arbor, on deck, Taylor Day.
Low enough? Greetings, legislators and citizens. Thank you for allowing me this time to speak regarding redistricting of North Carolina's voting district maps. I am Diane Arbor, a resident of Hickory, North Carolina. I am here to demand the new maps be done fairly. And to me, that means that the maps must be drawn by an independent redistricting committee to keep all legislators out of the process. This would eliminate favoritism to either party. This process would also eliminate the need for these redistricting sessions, saving taxpayers' funds and legislators' times. If a committee is not possible at this time, then maps should not include any partisan gerrymandering. Communities should be kept together, no packing or cracking. Information regarding incumbents should not be used. We should refer to the 1965 Voter Rights Act for guidance. And transparency must exist in every step of the process. This process is not transparent. We are being asked to comment on maps we have not seen. Additional sessions must be held after the new maps are available. Only 3 sessions being held for the entire state with only 6 days' notice to citizens? Certainly not enough. Online comment portal must be available for citizens. The map drawing process should be live streamed. We need to see what you guys are up to. Transparency. And remember, gerrymandering voting maps is another form of voter suppression. Thank you.
Tyler Day, on deck, Peg Heights.
Good afternoon. Both Republicans and Democrats have gerrymandered North Carolina's voting districts in the past. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Last week, I watched as a bill was discussed in the House Rules Committee. Representative Destin Hall, the chair of the House Rules Committee and the chair of the House Redistricting Committee, said that the state board, and I quote, should not be making partisan decisions, end quote. Representative Hall also said of the state legislature, quote, this place is partisan. That's what happens in the elected body. The administration, though, of those elections should not be partisan, and we can't take partisanship out of the minds and hearts of folks, end quote. Yet for decades, our redistricting process in North Carolina has been nothing more than a series of partisan decisions made by a partisan elected body. And both Democrats and Republicans are to blame for when they were in power. So how about prohibiting partisan advantage in redistricting? In 2022, state courts found that the legislative and congressional maps drawn by the state legislature were the result of intentional pro-Republican partisan redistricting. And I will say, as a resident of the Triad, I was appalled to see the Triad split between 4 congressional districts. In 2021, a Represent US poll found that 89% of North Carolina voters, including 89% of Trump voters and 92% of Biden voters, opposed gerrymandering. And the same poll found that only 22% of North Carolinians trust state legislators to draw new districts. So I implore this state legislature to implement a process that requires bipartisan input and support. This, again, is something Representative Hall said is needed in the administration of elections. We need voting districts that prioritize community representation, not partisan gain. And as President Ronald Reagan said it best when he called gerrymandering, quote, undemocratic and un-American. So it's time for our state legislature to put partisanship aside and do what's best for North Carolinians. And in the future, we need an independent citizens commission to draw these districts.
Peg Heights, on deck, Monica Driscoll.
Hi, I'm Peg Heights, and I'm from Hickory, North Carolina, right here. And I've been sitting here listening to these forceful, articulate, intelligent speakers, all. And I've been asking myself, it's not rocket science, is it? Most of us know fair. Most of us recognize corruption. No matter what side of the aisle we're on, we know a George Santos or a Bob Menendez when we see them. And also, North Carolina is a supreme sports state. We're proud of that. We, of all the states, know how important the rules of the game are. So if and when the refs huddle a day before the game and change the rules of play, no one would need to tell us that's not fair. We would know, wouldn't we? And by that same measure, we all know what's going on here. And the rest of the nation is watching. Let me say that again. The rest of our nation is watching as our refs huddle. It is not rocket science, is it?
Monica Driscoll, on deck, Lawrence Cormier.
Good afternoon. I am Monica Driscoll. I am from Transylvania County, west and south of Buncombe County. It's a 2-hour drive. I begin with the only positive statement I am prepared to make right now, especially after hearing, I am convinced after hearing the speakers before me. Thank you for holding public hearings. In spite of the fact that there are only 3 for this great wide state, and the short notice, and the lack of having information available for any of us to really be able to give you the most constructive input that you should be receiving. From there, it really, I'm just not in the habit really of speaking publicly all that often. I'm doing more and more of it. But that was the good part. It deteriorates from here. And I will try to be nice. How dare you limit hearings to 3? On short notice, without the materials, I'm repeating myself. Next, how dare you create a law to hide the process from state public records for us to be aware of what is going on? I can guarantee you that at some point, the depth of those shenanigans will come back to bite you. We'll probably all be bitten. But as far as it's biting the body that is making these decisions, the sooner the better. The people of the great state of North Carolina deserve much better, regardless of income, health and wellness, gender, ethnicity, or religious affiliation. We all should be treated equally. From Brunswick County and Hanover on the coast to Transylvania, Buncombe, Haywood in the mountains, we ask that you give serious consideration to treating us equally. Thank you.
Lawrence Cormier.
Cormier, thank you.
And then on deck will be Jacob Beaver.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Cormier. I live in High Point, Guilford County. 90 minutes away, but hey, there's only 3, so we gotta go somewhere. I'm here as a citizen to advocate for my vote being equal to all others. I hope the thoughts of all the speakers here today will not just be thrown under the rug. With only 3 sites to do this, with no notice, or virtually no notice, with the recent legislation to hide the actions, the only thing I can say is it doesn't smell a heck of a lot different than a field full of cow flaps. Voting rights are so important. There have been 4 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, 5 Civil Rights Acts, and 5 other acts to ensure U.S. citizens have the right to vote. Districting in a gerrymandering manner is no different than taking the right to vote away, so that votes would not have equal status to all other votes, and should be a crime. It is also clearly visible that taking away the right to vote against is what true patriots would not stand for, and immoral. It has the same effect of not voting at all. We've heard about 100 people here today ask for stopping the gerrymandering. 89% of the voters polled have said stop gerrymandering, and everyone here is fearful. Not one person has spoken in favor of past actions, and we have the opportunity now to change those actions in the future. My county has been targeted to be carved up all the way to the west border. It is about time for morality to return to the NCGA and drawing distance lines that will truly bring true representation to the NCGA. Democracy, esse quam videri, that is the state motto, to be rather than seem. Why don't we make it so that democracy is real?
My name
Jacob
is
Beaver on deck. Amira Sago.
My name is Jacob Beaver, and I reside in Hickory. My faith as a younger citizen of this state, in this state's future, is waning, because I've watched ruling overturn ruling over the past year over whether our voting districts can be manipulated by partisan interests. I fear what the next ruling will be. I do not believe that any party or any individual should have the ability to indefinitely secure power for themselves. It is undemocratic, un-American, and an enabling principle of a tyrannical force that over 360,000 North Carolinians died to defeat almost a century ago, fascism. I am here to ask for a transparent, communicative, and publicly involved district forming process to prevent that force from rooting itself in the Western world again. What also concerns me is the design of today's hearings, which others have already commented on. I'm incredibly privileged to be here today, but millions more are not, and that is not fair. Reflect fairness in future hearings and districts, not fascism. These poorly planned hearings reflect my concern over this government's duty to uphold democracy for my generation's future, a process which needs everyone's input. This state is run by people, not by one party. I hope the people prevail in our district designs.
Amira Sago.
Well, you got my last name right. It's Amira Sago. It's
On
nice to
deck,
meet you guys.
hold on. On deck, Ellen Thompson.
It's nice to meet you. Well, I'm sorry. I'll just start off by saying I'm sorry you guys have to sit here and let people talk at you. I'm sure that that's really hard. So thank you for meeting here with us today, and I appreciate you guys giving Hickory the opportunity to express our concerns with this whole redistricting mess. I'm certain you guys have heard plenty of great arguments about why people think redistricting, all this stuff is expedited and it's odd and secretive and it's just messy, to say the least. But I just want to bring to your attention that the maps that we voted on in 2022, the midterm elections, those maps voted 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats. Those were drawn independently by redistricting special masters. So why are we redrawing them for a third time? Why, when the nonpartisan map we have, why are we drawing them again for a third time? Why are we drawing them again when those are drawn completely unparalleled and completely nonpartisan? Should you guys need to draw new maps, let's say that's a necessity for some reason, I implore you to hold more hearings at more accessible times in around a dozen different locations, as has happened in the past, at times that people can actually get to, so that you can truly understand what your constituents think about the maps you wish to impose. Thank you for your time, though.
Ellen Thompson, on deck Cliff Moon.
Senator Daniels, Senator Heiss, members of the Redistricting Committee, my fellow citizens, thank you for your time today. My perspective comes from my career in business, but it was my husband, Rob Thompson, a proud member of the 82nd Airborne, who got me here today. We love our country. As a business person, I expect nothing less than good process coming out of Raleigh. What has been presented in the name of redistricting would be considered unacceptable in any business setting I have ever led or worked in. I have not even seen maps. I have not been given information by which I can make an informed decision. This, in a century with radio, television, internet, and global positioning systems. I expect to see good value for the spend of our tax dollars. I am disappointed that these meetings were called at such short notice and at such inconvenient times. We can't have good representation when so many people are left out. I appeal to your sense of loyalty to your country and to your fellow citizens to hold many meetings in diverse settings and locations across the state, to provide a clear and transparent timeline, and to provide public education about the redistricting process. Include remote participation, a public comments portal, response by mail, by phone via a toll-free hotline where comments are captured. Make videos and notes of hearings accessible online. I support a nonpartisan process, and I thank you all for your time today.
Cliff Moon, and on deck Richard Spear.
Thank you. My name is Cliff Moon. I am been a lifelong citizen of North Carolina and an over 30-year citizen of Catawba County and Hickory. It is Moon, and Bob knows it. I just want y'all to know that he just does that. Jay, you're the only one that doesn't have a sign now. I want you to know that too, because Representative McNeely did. I tried to get him to pass you one, but he didn't do it. So, and I know. I want to thank you all first, because I know how hard you work. I've been to the legislature many times. I've met most of you before. You work very hard for the citizens of this state. And you spend a lot of time, too much in some of our opinions, at the legislature and not enough back home, but that's okay. What I want to say is thank you, but even more, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being eloquent citizens. I've been listening to so many eloquent speeches today by people who actually ought to be running for their offices. But I also respect them, and I also respect what they're trying to do, even though this process is not what it probably ought to be, and I think you've heard that enough today from me. I will say this. This is ostensibly a hearing about redistricting. It seems to me, however, that it's really a cover-up for gerrymandering. I want you to prove me wrong because I know you care about North Carolina. I do. I mean this. I know you work hard, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Thank you very much.
Richard Spear on deck, and Fisher.
Well, first of all, thank you all for having this meeting today, allowing us to speak. My name is Richard Spear. I'm a retired Army veteran, 22 years Army Special Forces. I've run for Congress in North Carolina twice. In fact, I've been a resident here for 47 years since Uncle Sam first sent me here. I've heard a lot of comments today about having nonpartisan commissions to draw districts. Well, gerrymandering isn't something that's new in this state or in this country. It's been going on for forever. It was recognized from the very beginning. Even in the writing of the Federalist Papers, they recognized that. We had it for 100 years under Democrats here, but I'm glad to see now that we have Republicans in charge, so many Democrats are against gerrymandering. When I looked at the districts that were written up in November 2021, issued in 2021, I noticed that across the 100 counties in North Carolina, only 9 were split counties. The rest were consolidated districts. Even the maps that the special masters gave us have 11 split counties. Furthermore, I've heard talk about what's even now. The special masters gave us even maps, 52-48. Let's look at some of the numbers. Representative Fox, very close. She won by a margin of 27 points, 63-36. Representative Dan Bishop, he won by a margin of 40 points, 70-30. Representative McHenry, my congressman, won by a margin of 44%, 72-28. Yet I look at a number of our Democratic representatives, and they did win by single digits. So we have packing. We have always had packing. I would encourage the legislature. You approved a map in November 21 that you believed accurately reflected North Carolina. The state Supreme Court was unable to provide any specific legal or constitutional error to it. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled not on whether the maps were right, but whether the Supreme Court had a place. The maps were constitutionally and legally properly prepared. If the citizens want a special masters, then they need to amend the U.S. Constitution to provide for that. Thank you for your opportunity.
Ann Fisher on deck, Sigrid Heiss.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad the opportunity is here for us to be able to speak to you. I'm Ann Fisher from Burke County, Morganton. I'm the president of the women's chapter there, Democratic Women's Chapter, and a precinct chair. I've been involved in the political process a very long time. I have run for Congress twice and the state Senate twice, and I did get elected to the Soil and Water Board of Supervisors. Full disclosure, I am a grandniece of a suffragette, so the voting rights and election integrity is very deep in the DNA. 2 points, really. It's imperative, you've heard this all afternoon, that we have balanced and fair drawing of the lines for congressional districts as well as state legislative districts. That allows and encourages the voters to participate of all political persuasions, to have fair and balanced distribution of its voters and elect candidates in order to represent that distribution. The second point, from my perspective, living in Burke County now for the last 50 years to be exact, in the last 12 years especially, we have been bounced around in 3 different congressional districts, making for a very unstable constitution of the voter integrity and the demographics. The voters must choose their representatives, as we have heard several times, not the other way around. And just results constantly, continually, promotes grab for the legislative power of particular political parties and to consolidate that power rather than think of what is for the highest good and the interests of the voters and the citizens in our various districts, and results in the loss of public services and protections for safe homes, health care, and especially voting rights, as well as a workplace environment and schools. The recent spat of legislation we've all seen happen lately have been detrimental to the aforementioned policy areas I've mentioned. The 2022 election cycle displayed a much fair and proportional distribution of representatives from the two major parties. We can do much better. We must do better for our legislative districts. And that I hope that you will definitely make sure we have elected officials to be smart and aware and make decisions based for the highest good of the citizens of North Carolina and drawing maps from which they choose the best candidates and better knowledge and information about them. Thank you very much. I will say, the Democrats have been working very hard for safe schools, banning assault weapons that kill children, and the Republicans are trying to ban books. When's the last time a book has ever killed anybody?
Sigrid Heiss. On deck, Mary Shelton.
Good afternoon. I am Sigrid Heiss. I'm a resident of Catawba County. I've lived in Catawba County for more than 40 years. More than 25 years ago, a poll judge made a strong attempt to deter me from voting during a presidential election. First, she told me that I was not eligible to vote, though I had been registered to vote for over 3 years at the time. Then she told me to drive to Newton to settle the issue at the Board of Elections. I insisted on a phone call to the Catawba County Board of Elections instead and was told immediately on the telephone that I am eligible to vote. Reluctantly, the poll judge told me to get back in line, and when the poll worker was ready to hand the ballot to me, the poll judge walked up behind her and said, "Don't give it to her yet." I had to get back in line, but I did vote that day. And I also knew the poll judge's party affiliation, too. Today, I fear that my future votes are in danger of being discounted or invalidated, and that democracy is being subverted because of flagrant party gerrymandering by the Republican Party. Redistricting traditionally occurs decennially after the census data has been released, but sadly in Raleigh it occurs more frequently, especially when the majority of one party sees an opportunity to reach their goals by unfairly and undemocratically changing districts, like what is happening now, to enable elected officials to choose their voters. Voters should choose their elected officials, not the other way around. Therefore, district maps should be drawn to represent people equally and reflect the people's will, not the will of the politicians. The actions of the North Carolina Republican legislators translate into partisan gerrymandering, which further divide instead of unite our citizens and do not represent constituents in a just and equitable manner. I find this shameful, hurtful, and unacceptable. I ask you to represent all of your constituents through a just democratic process as set forth by the Constitution. Thank you.
Mary Shelton. On deck, Sarah Ivey, I believe.
I'm Mary Shelton, first chair from Lincoln County. I wanted to speak today, first of all, about the steps from the Redistricting Committee that you took to notify the public of this meeting today and the other two meetings this week in various locations. The time of day this meeting is being held limits the broad constituency from participating in this surveys. Also, the 3 meetings available for North Carolina's 100 counties to make comment do not fully represent enough voters across the state. Elizabeth City, Hickory, and Raleigh are not a fair representation. Voters in Murphy, North Carolina would have traveled 3 hours and 8 minutes to get here today. Folks living in Carolina Beach have a 4-hour, 9-minute drive to Elizabeth City. The communication from the Redistricting Committee was less than robust. I knew nothing about this meeting until last Thursday. So, to sum up the process, number 1, Lack of notification limits participation. Number 2, time of day cuts out the working voters. Number 3, few locations for meetings are prohibitive to those having to drive long distances. The message I am hearing loud and clear is that our state representatives from the Redistricting Committee do not want to hear our concerns, but want to check the box, so to speak. As a North Carolina voter, I would ask that more opportunities be made available for anyone across the state to voice their opinion at meetings like these, and maps be presented for all to see. Thank you.
Sarah Ivey.
Airy.
Airy. And on deck is Eric Schramm.
Hello, my name is Sarah Airy. I am a taxpayer and citizen of Catawba County. My husband and I have both taken time out of our busy lives and careers to work elections because we believe that fair elections are important. I have been listening to the wise words of so many of my fellow citizens, and I second what they have all said. I will add that as a former school teacher in a public school, I never had a student who believed that the quality of their work would lead to their success cheat. I don't need to ask if you believe the quality of your work will lead to your success in a fair election. I don't need to ask if you have the moral courage and integrity to uphold fair elections. Your actions in the next weeks will show all of us if you do. Thank you.
Eric Schramm, followed by Jonathan Sundell.
Hi, I'm Eric Schramm. I'm from Catawba County. I've been living here for 25 years. Thank you for being here. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I don't have actually prepared remarks. Part of that has to do with the hastiness with which these hearings were prepared. But the speakers who have come before me have given long lists and spoken articulately about the issues with this process and with partisan gerrymandering in general. I know you know it. We all know it. Somebody said it's not rocket science. And in the end, the previous speaker brought up moral courage. And I guess that's what I really wanted to ask you about, is if when that time comes for you to make your decisions in your room on these maps, if you could stand up to some of the pressure that you might be getting from party members, lobbyists, or the courts. There's lots of pressures that you might be facing, I'm sure. And sometimes it might seem overwhelming. A lot of us feel powerless, frankly, when it comes to these processes. And I think you've also heard from us that there's a lack of faith in democracy, and that we're worried about democracy's future here in the state and in the country at large. And sometimes just individual decisions, and an individual with moral courage can make a difference. And so that's what I'm asking you to do when it comes time for you to cast your vote and put your input into these maps. If you could just do what you know is right, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Jonathan Sundell, on deck, Rita Burns-Wooten.
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Sundell. I've been living in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for 39 years. I'm awed by all these speakers, and I can't speak as eloquently, but I will give it a shot here. First of all, I want to say that I agree that it certainly looks from the way things have transpired that this is not set up with a true view to hear from folks. On the other hand, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. I look at your faces, I see that you seem to be truly listening and urge you to do so and urge you to act on this. I think perspective often helps on things. I'm a retired children's librarian, worked for Forsyth County Public Library for 22 years, the school system for 10. We served everybody equally. And so I think that's an important perspective. Another thing is that I've spent a great deal of time in Central America. They all have elected governments just about now, but I wouldn't say they have functional democracies. We can easily go the same way as they have, okay? We've had a good start, but just having votes doesn't mean you really have a democracy. I would say that we are going backwards instead of forwards in the last few years, and there's been a lot of effort and a lot of suffering put in, particularly by African Americans in the United States, to try to move us forward in voting rights. I urge us to keep moving that way instead of backwards. I haven't run a business, but I've been told that businesses nowadays have realized, the larger businesses that are successful, that the more they have diverse input, the more successful those businesses are. We will not get diverse input from this kind of gerrymandering. We'll get things going more and more to extremism. Thank you.
Rita Burns-Wooten. On deck is Joe Wooten.
Good afternoon. My name is Rita Burns-Wooten. I'm a resident of Conover, North Carolina. I'm here today to say that there needs to be a better process in the hearings to come on redistricting. There's been a lack of public notices and participation allowed in developing this criteria. Posting a notice in the Hickory Daily Record just this past Saturday is inadequate notice to the public. And maps have never been provided. So how can we, the public, know if the maps are fair as far as racial and community interests are concerned? Also, scheduling this meeting at 4 p.m. on a weekday prevents many working residents from participating and letting their voices be heard. After maps are provided, host meetings after traditional work hours and provide both virtual and Spanish language options for testimony. Be transparent. Ensure that every person's vote counts. Thank you for your time.
Joe Wooten.
Yeah, Joe Wooten here. I'm wondering if you all are having fun yet. I mean, I guess you signed up for this. Representing us, you should be. So like many people have said, 3 hearings on redistricting being held in our state of North Carolina, Hickory, Raleigh, and Elizabeth City. That's insufficient. People are aware that redistricting is used to draw maps that can negatively affect voting. More opportunities to provide input strengthens democracy. Less opportunity reduces input, reduces democracy. So the people living in Asheville, Henderson, Brevard, Morganton, Boone, Gastonia, Charlotte, and many, many other cities west of here have to take off work to come here and make their voices heard, or hope that their letters are actually read. That is a poor model of democracy. Forgive me if I or others look at this process and come to the conclusion that you do not want public input, or at least that a goal is to severely limit public input. Where are the pictures of the projected maps so I can be an educated voter? Who made what I would call an obvious decision to limit public input, or at least severely limit it? I timed myself before I came here, and I easily read this. Historically, redistricting maps have been used to water down, if not eliminate, the votes, and therefore the representation of minority voters. Democracy needs the input of citizens. Most citizens would have to take off time in order to come here. So given the lack of meetings and times and geological locations, I just assume you all are trying to limit public input. Allowing people to write letters isn't enough. Please use this process to increase public input, not to limit it, because limiting public input is limiting democracy.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That concludes the speakers who have signed up to speak. I want to thank you all for your attendance, for those that drove long distances, and for your decorum during the meeting. And safe travels home. This meeting is now adjourned.